Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a departure from our usual, focus on leadership, and we're going to talk a little bit about being in career transition. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but there's been a lot of news as of late. Today, that what we're recording it is November 3rd. Last week, Target Corporation in my own backyard, in Molly's backyard, who I'm going to introduce here in just a second, we laid off about 1,000 people plus 800 unfilled roles are going to continue to go unfilled. Same week, Amazon announced somewhere around the potential of 30,000 layoffs. Sounds like they executed about 14,000 last week, and I think this has been on my mind. And Molly and I were set to record today. Again, I'm going to introduce Molly in just a second. And she sent me an email. She's like, hey, do you want to talk about career transitions? That's actually a big, part of what I do. And I said, well, this is a leadership podcast, but then I'm reminded of a saying that my wife and I have from time to time when we feel a little rule bound on things, where it's like, wait a second, I'm the adult. I get to make the rule, right? And so I sort of said to Molly over email, I said, well, this is what my podcast is usually about, but I guess I created that rule and I can break that rule anytime I want. So today we're going to be talking about career transitions. And with me for this conversation today is Molly Conlin Peterson. She's an executive and career coach and founder of the Daring Venture. Thrilled to have you on, and thank you for prompting this conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kent. It's lovely to be here, and I really appreciate the invite. I think this topic is really relevant given what's going on right now. And so I'm excited to be here. And also, just to share some support for people, because I think a lot of people are out there feeling pretty unsettled. And
And I would add to that too, feeling unsettled if you've gotten the announcement or the, that your job is ended or coming to an end, or even the looming, maybe your job could come to an end at any moment kind of feeling, or even those of us out here who are like, what can I do? I don't have a job. I can't give you a job, but I want to help in some way. So I have a feeling our conversation will cover the gamut here. But before we get into that, Molly, I want to hear a little bit about your journey, career arc, and sort of what bring us up to date with then what you're doing.
Well, thank you for asking. So I have been doing career coaching and transition work for the past 28 years. I'm founder of an organization called the Daring Venture. And I'll just share with you a little bit about how I got started. Mm-hmm. So I spent the first 10 years of my career in selling advertising for arts publications, for newspapers, magazines, and then arts publications. And I was doing this.
See the natural transition already.
Right. How did she get here? How did that work? And so, I want to say this because I think a lot of times people are in a role where it looks really good on the outside. Like, I was working on straight commission. I was making great money. I had a downtown, there's all these outer things that looked really cool and fun. And inside, quietly, I just felt such a discontent. And so I started kind of looking around, trying to figure out, do I want to be a counselor? Do I want to be, I really was into, kind of figure out meaning and purpose for people. And then this thing happened. A friend of mine, one of my very best friends, got laid off, and she got matched up with a career coach at an organization, a nonprofit organization that's still in existence today. It's called Women Venture. And so she came home from her first meeting. We were roommates at the time. And she said, this woman has your job. You need to go meet with her.
Okay.
And so I did. I called her up. I went and met with her. And she said, we have volunteer opportunities. And it was one of those things where, it doesn't happen very often, but when you meet somebody and you talk to them and you're like, this is what I want to do. This is exactly, I had that feeling. And so I started volunteering there because I had a lot of freedom in my schedule. I started volunteering there. I was doing coaching. Then I was doing teaching classes. And then I started teaching another class. So I say this out loud because I think sometimes when people are making transitions, there's well, how do I get experience? And to go and try some things out and volunteer and put your skills to use and test drive it. And by doing that, I got confirmation, and then I ended up changing my, I was in math, getting a graduate degree at the time, and I changed my path. And lo and behold, a job opened up there.
Cool.
And I was clearly not the most qualified person. And I got it because I was basically doing the role. And it was there was another piece to this. And I just want to say this out loud because I think this is what scares a lot of people from making changes too, is it was a pretty significant pay cut. And I was like, okay, I am going to bite the bullet. I'm going to figure this out. And I did. So I did this for about 5 years, and it's kind of where I cut my teeth and learned some skills. I finished my master's degree, got my coaching certification. And then what happened is that there was a series of layoffs in our organization, and my position was cut to part-time. It was after 9/11, and I decided I had this dream of starting my own practice. So so I decided to take the leap of faith, but I wanted to do it wisely. So I ended up, outplacement was really hot at the time. A lot of people were getting laid off, not dissimilar to what's happening now.
Yeah.
So I ended up negotiating this role with an outplacement organization where I would work for them part-time, and then I would see my own clients part-time, and we came to an agreement. And it worked beautifully for about 10 years. So that is kind of how I got going on doing career transition work. And there was a couple highlights that I want to just point out because I think they were kind of cool. I think, one of the things that was fun to work on, there was because a lot of people at midlife are trying to figure out, I think a lot of people like at Target right now where there's higher level executives. They're like, okay, I'm not quite to the retirement age, but I need to find something that's meaningful and purposeful and probably make some money. Or maybe I can partly retire. So figuring out like that next chapter of what that's going to look like, it's that encore career planning. And I was involved pretty heavily with the guy who invented GPS, started this Empowered Careers in California, and it was a partnership with UCLA, and we developed a program for midlife career changers, and we're coaching those changers, and then kind of figuring out kind of some structures to put in place for them. So that was one startup, and then the other one that was really kind of fun was there's an organization called Social Finance, SoFi. They're out of California, and there's a loan company. And they started providing career transition services to everyone who was a member because they thought, well, if people get back to work earlier, then we're not going to have a problem with loans. And then if people have a good career trajectory, they're going to make probably more money, and then they're going to buy a house, and then they're going to feel loyalty. So it was really a brilliant idea. So there were a couple of us that got brought in to kind of build that business up and to really kind of do some cool things about how do you find meaningful work? How do you ask for a raise? How do you, make those transitions that are going to really take you to the next level in terms of your work? So I'm, so that's a little bit about my journey. I've had my own business now since, since 2002.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And then the other piece that I guess I want to bring in today that's pretty meaningful is about 12 years ago, I took a little bit of a turn and there's a woman by the name of Dr. Brené Brown, who's pretty well known. She's written a bunch of books. I went and was a huge fan of hers and went and got certified in her work and started a second business called The Daring Venture, which is now kind of where I've rolled everything into with a partner. And we started bringing that work to leaders and teams. It was a program called Dare to Lead. And it was really transformational work, courage building skills. And one of the kind of the primary premises of Brené's work in that is, when you think about being courageous and doing something that feels out of your comfort zone, it's vulnerability, right? Risk, emotional exposure with no guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
It's really what job search is all about. And it's when you're about to do those things, it's not fear that holds you back. It's those moments of how do you self-protect?
Mm-hmm.
Those pattern ways that we self-protect when we feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
And how do you then build those skills, those small moments of courage, so that you can do the thing you really want to do and get past those feelings of, okay, this is my pattern. This is what I do. This is how I show up in these situations. And start to, do those small things that actually move you forward. And that's true in leadership. That's true in life. That's true in career change. And I really think that's the piece that for a lot of people, we can do a roadmap of how do you do a career change.
Mm-hmm.
But man, career, I mean, this is hard work. This is really scary work. It's scary for people to be in transition. There's a lot of feelings and emotions. You're putting yourself out there in ways that require resilience.
Yep.
And it's courage, right? And so this work, I feel like this is a culmination, right, of the career transition stuff, and then the courage, and those get combined to be a really kind of way that we can help people transform.
Yeah. You're right, I think. And I'd be shocked if anyone listening doesn't know who Brené Brown is, given the audience. And having been on the job market myself a number of times in my career, I 100% agree with what you're saying here in terms of just there's this element of courage, the need to, I think there's even a book titled this, and I'm not necessarily trying to quote that, but the ability to feel the fear and do it anyway, right? Around certain things like networking, for example. I think a lot of people, have a bad impression of what good networking actually is. And even if you have a sense of what good networking is and could look like, you still have to, I don't know, for lack of a better way to put it, like you still have to swallow some level of pride in order to put yourself out there, right? So let's get into this, because let me add a little extra context too, because I was just looking at this last week, and I'm not going to pull it all up, so I'm not going to be able to quote it all correctly. But you've got while in the Twin Cities, where I believe you're located here too, right?
I am. Yeah.
So while in the Twin Cities, the announcement about Target last week was pretty big. It is actually somewhere in the middle of the pack, if not lower third of the pack, in terms of layoffs this year, right? And I think just since June, with companies that are large enough to be remarkable or newsworthy, we are approaching, I think it's like over 170,000 layoffs. Right. So if you think about that for a minute, and think about like the amount of small to mid-sized companies that maybe are not big enough or don't have big enough names behind them to be remarkable or newsworthy, my guess is the number of layoffs just since June is probably well over 200,000, right? And that number hit me really hard last week. I'm trying to think about, what can I do? I'm not a career coach. I learned a lot of valuable lessons about networking way back when I, more than probably 12 years ago or more, when I was really first trying to leave consulting and get into HR. And interestingly, going, from HR to now being, a solo consultant, entrepreneur, however you want to word that. Interesting in some regards how networking and sales are very much very interrelated, if not identical. Like that's one thing I'm thinking about is like how can I help people learn how to network better or things like that. But I don't want to barrel down that topic yet necessarily. But I think it was when you reached out on Friday before we were recording and you were like, hey, I think you must have seen something that I posted about it. And you're like, hey, do you want to have that conversation instead? And I was like, I think just felt compelled to say, yeah. So where do you want to start the conversation about, maybe we start with that oh shit moment of, I got the 15-minute meeting on my calendar. Maybe we take it from there.
Yeah, I'm in it, and I just want to say, like my heart goes out to so many people that are in this boat. And I think one of the things when you are in this boat, there's shock, there's anger, disbelief, all of those feelings, or fear, especially what's going on because so many people are getting laid off.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, it normalizes it. And so there's like this feeling of like, hey, I'm not alone. This is happening to everyone. Because I think there's this piece of, am I not good enough? Why did they pick me?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also this like fear of like, oh my gosh, everybody's flooding the job market right now. So I think I just want to say that out loud. So give yourself a beat to feel what you're feeling, get some support, give yourself some grace. I think, so many people say, well, you got to get out there right away and get networking. And I would say, just take a moment, to really collect yourself and feel what you're feeling. And then you can start to lay that foundation of some of that inner work and start to dream about, okay, what would I like to have happen? What's possible? What do I like to do best?
Yeah.
And I think, I would just also say, I think people start to feel that panicky feeling of, I just need to land, I just need to get a job. And by slowing it down a little bit, you're probably going to land in a better place. You're going to show up in those meetings in a better place. You're going to be more prepared. You're going to have more thoughtful questions. You're going to have a more thoughtful story to tell.
Yeah.
And so it's that counterintuitive of go slow to go fast, and start to think about those do that. Like I have a best self profile, it's skills, values, strengths, personality, imaginary lives. That's a really fun one. Purpose, what are the practical needs? And to kind of just go through those things to just refresh, because it might be different today than it was, 5 years ago or whenever you last looked for a job.
Right. Yeah. Well, let me, my number one recommendation for people is, if you were offered outplacement service, transition service, take it. Like, don't sit on that. And I'm going to give like my mischievous reason first and foremost is, more often than not, if you do not like, so I both used and I worked for Lee Hecht Harrison for a very short amount of time as a transition coach. So I do have some experience as a transition coach, even though it's not necessarily what I do. Although I would say I always have like one person that I'm coaching in transition, more as like out of care than what it is that I'm doing. But in some cases, the way these contracts work with these outplacement firms are, the company doesn't pay if you don't actually call and initiate and activate that service. And so there's a mischievous part of me that always says like, hey, go find out what the minimum is that you need to do to make sure your former employer pays for this, right? But that's just me being kind of snarky. But at the very least, most of these, at the very least, give a resume review, if not a resume rewrite. And that in and of itself, because I think one of the things that I keep seeing in these, for me, gut-wrenching LinkedIn posts that I see from folks is people with 15 to 25 years. I mean, there's plenty of people with less than 15 who are being laid off, 4 years, 5 years or less. Yes. But I'm thinking about these folks who are in that 15 to 25 year mark, who may have not put a resume together in 20 years, who haven't interviewed with somebody they don't know already in 20 years. Right. And so even just this, I always say the resume review or rewrite is probably in the ballpark of $300 to $500 in value that your outgoing employer is essentially paying for. Right. So I always say, first and foremost, if you're being offered transition services, take it, right? Do it.
Absolutely.
If it's with, sometimes there's no choice. It's here's who we use. That's the package. And I'd wager there's probably some cases where there's some flexibility of we will pay for a transition service and you might need to do some legwork to find someone. But I think that would probably be more the exception than the rule. I think more companies, here's who we work with and you have this many days to activate it, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do you want to pile on that?
I agree with you. I mean, that's a service. You're getting support, and you should, if you have a service that's already in place, you should absolutely take advantage of that because they're going to support you in lots of different ways. And if you have an amount of money, I mean, I've had clients come to me that said, "Hey, I got assigned to this person, but I'd rather work with you," and I negotiated that with my employer. And so you can do exactly what you just said if you if you're so inclined. But if you have free career transition services, 100%, because that's a support system and that's structure, and that's kind of what you need right now is somebody to kind of guide you through this process and help you be a thought partner and help you brainstorm and think things through and just revisit all those elements of because you're in it and it's hard to be outside of yourself.
Yeah.
And to have somebody that can kind of take you through it.
Yeah. So let me shove us forward a little bit because I think this is a unique conversation for my podcast at least. All right. So you're a part of you're a part of a group who may have gotten laid off last week, right? So it's you're maybe about a week in to either your job has already ended or you have an end date listed. Maybe you're still technically transitioning out. What should people be doing right now?
Yeah. Well, to your point,
take a beat. I like that.
For sure. Get a journal, start to write down things because, capture, what do I love to do the most? What do I want to do next? What's possible? What's most important? Either talk that through with somebody or, write it down for yourself and then keep a list of ideas and options that you think you might want to check out. I also highly recommend just revisiting some of those assessments. The Myers-Briggs is awesome because it actually has lists of careers that you may not have even thought about that can open up possibilities or confirm like, oh yeah, that does make sense based on my Myers-Briggs, or the Strengths Finder. Because what you really want to do is lead with be able to tell your story and be able to say, here's what I've done. Here's what I do really well. So list out some of those accomplishments that you're most proud of. That can also be really helpful. And then here's kind of what I want to do next. And start to just kind of put that framework together. And start to make lists of people. But you don't have to, at this point, you're doing that inner work of you want to get yourself online, figure it out first so that those conversations, 70% of jobs are found through networking. I think that number has gone up now because of all the
and just how many people are on the market too, right? And you probably see a bit more of this given, what's in your algorithm compared to mine, but I know there's a lot of talk about how AI is being used for helping people tweak their resume, to beat the applicant tracking system, right? Which, interestingly, we say AI about everything. It's large language models, it's machine learning, right? Which applicant tracking systems have been using for years, right? Scanning resumes for keywords, right? And that can be really tricky. And not that I want to dive into this yet, but that can be really tricky because the words your company uses for something might be very different from, the words another company uses for something, right? And so, and it can be a lot, if people are applying to. So I'm not really talking about the people who were laid off last week at this moment, but people who I've seen this through 2025 is, I've applied to tens to hundreds of, jobs, right? And that to be expected to customize your resume to 100 applications, right? is a lot, right? So on the one hand, and I didn't want to get into this, but here I am getting into it because there was something else I wanted to talk about. But I would I would say you should be using. I mean, that makes light work, right? If you're using AI right as a thought partner, being able to say, "Here's this job posting. Here's my resume."
Yeah.
Don't have it do the work for you. Actually, ask it to make recommendations to you for you to do. That way, you know what's being tweaked and what's not.
Right.
But saying like, what do you recommend I update specifically in my resume, to help match the language of the company or whatever. Again, I didn't want to go down that road. What I wanted to go down was,
I think you're bringing up AI is a tool. It can be incredibly, I was just at a career conference and we were talking about, how do you prompt it for all these different things, like prepping for interviews, this exactly what you just said, take the job description, take your resume, prompt it into AI, and then, that's a jumping off point.
Yep.
So AI can be incredibly helpful.
Yep.
And the flip side of that is that now it's so easy to apply for all of these jobs because you can just take these two things, and then a lot of the job resumes look alike for recruiters.
Yeah. And this is where I think you had said something. Let me go back to it now. You had said something about the percentage of jobs that are found through your network versus applying.
Right.
And the quote unquote hidden job market, right? And I honestly thought that was a bit of hooey until I became a career coach. And out of the, I probably had 100 or some odd people that I was coaching. And, sure enough, I don't have the numbers in my head, but a number of them got a job through their network, right? And if not, kind of going back to this point about everyone, if everyone's using ChatGPT to tweak their resume, everybody's resumes are looking the same. Having someone walk your resume to the hiring manager, if not the recruiter, is one way to at least, it can at least fast track a phone call. But I would say that that's the, kind of getting back to the, importance of networking, which I want to make sure we dive into. Let me back up one more step and say, but first you said, first take a beat. There's some work, there's some inner work you can do to kind of think about who you want to be, what you want, what really fires you up. I also think what's interesting in this day and age is like, do I make a LinkedIn announcement or not? Right. And my personal opinion on that is when you're a part of an unremarkable layoff, meaning it's not newsworthy, I always encourage people to wait a little bit, before they were to make an announcement. Just start networking.
Yeah.
But with these mass layoffs, I have a completely 180 opinion on that. It is newsworthy. People know it tends to be pretty common knowledge that these are deep cuts that have little to do with performance. And so in these cases, I say, put the green banner up on LinkedIn, make some kind of announcement in this case, because people do want to help, right? And if they don't know, they might not know to help, right? But I'd love to get you, what are your thoughts on, do you make an announcement? Do you not?
I agree. I think that your point is a good one. Like there's these mass layoffs, people want to help. People are, I think all of our hearts are going out to people who are laid off right now. Everybody wants to help. And so it's as the person that got laid off, getting really clear about how can people help you, tell people how they can help, like being really specific about like, if I'm meeting with this person, how could they specifically help me, and getting that clear in your mind before you do the reach out, before you, and you might be exploring 5 or 6 different things, but then, and I suggest getting a spreadsheet together, because then you can get clearer on who am I reaching out to.
For the listeners, I am vigorously nodding.
What is my ask from them? What's my goal with this conversation? And then who did they refer me to? Because, usually it's like, hey, here's my situation. Here's what I love to do. Here's what I'm looking to do next.
Yep.
And here's kind of who I want to talk to or get introduced to or explore more. And then making sure that those people get followed back up with. So
Yeah, let me add to that, because I'm going to ask you some targeted questions, because I think we're on the networking, which I wanted to make sure we got on the networking, and I want to ask you some targeted questions here, but I want to add to the tracking thing. Best advice I ever got was to start tracking, and I would add yes and to everything you said here, but also I would add, when did I talk to this person?
Yes, for sure.
Write that date down, and was there any kind of follow-up discussed in the call? Like, did they say, hey, reach back out to me in a month, right? Then add a column, put this in Excel, add a column for that, and say, I'm going to reach back out to this person. This is the date, we agreed upon. Put that date in there and kind of use this as, like, essentially for those salespeople on the call, we're kind of talking about a personal CRM, essentially, right? Is who did I talk to? All right, but let's break down networking for a minute, because I think this is it's really hard for people. Both getting the courage up to reach out and ask someone for their time, but also figuring out what not to do and what to do in a networking call. So let me start with, because I think people I have run into more people who have a bad impression of networking than a good, right? And so let's start with what not to do. What's your advice on, don't do this in a networking call? Then we'll get into get right into but what should they do?
Well, I mean, I think that the first thing is if you are just laid off, people will say, well, just reach out to your network. And it's a vague, I got laid off, I need a job. Well, that's not helpful, right? Nobody's just sitting around thinking, oh, I've got a job for this person.
Right.
And so it's being really specific with each individual about what can they do to help. And then making sure you follow up. If they've given you a referral, there's nothing worse than somebody helping you, and then they're giving you a referral, and they never hear from you again. So making sure hey, I met with Joe Jones today. He was fantastic. Thank you so much for advocating for me. Here's my next step. Take them. Don't just let them hang. Make sure you're taking them on the journey with you, and that they can feel a part of helping you. And then what can you do for them? Because I feel like, sometimes I think networking gets a bad rap because it's all about me.
Yeah.
What do I need? And sometimes you might have connections or ideas, or even it might be something personal of making it a two-way street. So it doesn't feel transactional.
Yeah. Okay. I want to dissect some of these elements. Because I want to add one to the don't list, which I think is
okay. I went for it to the deuce, didn't I?
No, you did. It's okay. I like it, though. You're a coach. You are forward focused. You are not dwelling in the past. But I think it's implied in what you said, which is we're not going to ask for a job, right? When we reach out to someone, we are not asking them for a job, right?
No.
We are reconnecting, right? We are, perhaps telling our story of what happened to me, which I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because I always struggle with helping people with that. And I have some ideas on, especially if you're interested in jobs at that person's company, I certainly have ideas on, like, well, what are some of the questions you should ask? But I think one of the best parts and this is the, always do this, that I always say, which is, I always say, you should ask for at least 2 connections, right? Towards the end of the call, is there any, it could be, is there 1 or 2 people you think I should get to know at your company? Or, and the more specific you can make it, right, the better, right? I always say, everyone's ask is no one's ask. Such a broad ask doesn't help. You're putting the labor, is there anyone you think I should get to know? Well, the world becomes the possibility there, versus saying, let's say, I'm in marketing, right? Be more specific. Is there anyone in marketing that you think I should get to know? Is there anyone in, and now it's not, I'll have to go to let me go to HR, because that's my real background, to say, is there anyone in, instead of HR, let's keep getting narrow. Is there anyone in learning and development that you think I should get to know? Right. And I love your suggestion here of also, but follow up, let them know, hey, I did talk to so-and-so that you connected with me with. Thank you so much. Here's where I'm at, bringing people along, because you never know.
Yes.
Just like we're seeing right now too, you never know when you never know when people are going to get laid off. You never know when openings are going to come around. Sometimes people you're talking to don't know. And suddenly 3 weeks down the road, 4 weeks down the road, something opened up and you've been in contact and you might you might come to mind for that person so they can feed back. What kind of advice do you give people on when it comes to networking? I'm going to stick with this for a minute here of like, what should they be saying and asking, right? Other than for connections, and I also love how you said offer something, right? And that can be hard.
Yeah.
Like, what do you have to offer? Well, it can simply just be, let me know if there's anything I can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
I've even gone to, if I'm talking to someone in talent management, I might say, hey, I've been at the big firm, I've been at Korn Ferry. I've seen talent reviews implemented across 3 different companies in 3 completely different ways. If you ever want to pick my brain, about what I've seen, just let me know. Right. So it is not a problem to say, if there's anything I can do, let me know. It's similar to asking for connections. If you can make it more specific in any way, that's always great. But I think I've always found, even if all you can say is there anything I can do for you? People appreciate that.
They do. And it makes it a two-way street. And you can even pick up on something like, hey, they're, in this role, there's an article I could send them, or there's a podcast I could send them. It doesn't have to be something that costs money, but it's just a thoughtfulness piece. Well, I think your point is a great one, Ken. I mean, you have to be specific and you have to be clear. And then I would just maybe add on, is this a networking meeting or is this an informational interview? And those are different things and they're both valuable. And I think just set it up front. Like, is it networking? Am I, kind of brainstorming and getting information and maybe potential contacts? Or am I informational interviewing you to find out what does the day-to-day of this role look like? And they're both valuable for different reasons.
So when would you want to do one versus the other?
Well, I mean, I think that to your point, like if I just had a client that was in like a brand manager in a beauty industry, and she wanted to transition to healthcare. So she's like, how are my skills going to translate? And so before she even started that networking piece, she's like, I need to do some informational interviews to see what the lay of the land is. How does this work? How will this transfer? What things do I need to be talking about? The language. And I think it can also be helpful if you see an open role and you're like, I need to know about the culture of this company. So if there's some unanswered questions, it can be a really great way to get to know the people that are actually probably going to maybe potentially open doors for you in the future.
Right. Well, and I even say to people, like, pretend you still have a job in your head for a minute, and that it would take a lot to pull you, to recruit you away. What are the questions, if that were the scenario, that you would want to know about that company, that culture, that department or division or what have you, and ask those questions, right? Like, how is that entire division organized? Where do decision rights land? How are the stakeholder relationships in that company? But ask the questions from a sort of mentality of, I am employed and these questions would need to be answered to my satisfaction for me to want to leave.
Yes. I love that framework, that because you're just curious. It's a curiosity about the business and about maybe how they run the business and about what, to your point, how is this strategically set up? What are their goals for the future? What's the culture like? All of those kinds of things can be, and then it can be building on, a business conversation. So it's not about, I'm just, here to get it. It's like we can be thought partnering on things or sharing ideas. And that can be a really rich conversation too. That actually helps people see who you are.
Yeah. What else is top of mind for you with kind of this news coming out and where people might be?
Well, I think your point is a good one. Just like, how do we support people that are in this spot? And then the people that are in this spot. So I guess there's a couple categories, right? There's people that are in the spot that need help and being able to have some courage to take a beat, really clarify your message, get clear on who you want to talk to, but just also think about being in this, like, this is hard work and it may take some time. And so how do you build some support structure around you?
Mhm.
How do you, have, people in your life that can cheer you on when, it doesn't work out and kind of guide you through a process. So if you have outplacement, that's wonderful. I do outplacement with companies too. But finding your people that can support you. And the thing is, a lot of people that are laid off together can do that, a lot of that for each other as well.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you've got a group of friends that are all at Target. You guys can, be supporting each other in the
Yeah.
process.
Love that. Yeah. I want to add on. There was one thing you said, which was, but it made me think of, at a certain point, there will be a law of diminishing returns in terms of how many hours you sit in front of your computer trying to manifest a job opening to, right? Like,
Yes.
so I would say it's like, sure, dive in and spend a huge chunk of time in your first couple of weeks, because there's a lot, if you haven't been on the job market, there's a lot to absorb. There's a lot of jobs that have been sitting out there and hanging out there. Whether or not they're actually still available, who knows? But, but after, I would say, in my opinion, after 2 or 3 weeks, it and even that's probably too long, to be honest. But there's sort of a law of diminishing returns of sitting in front of your computer for 8 hours every day, and probably not the healthiest thing to do.
Right.
After a certain point.
I 100% agree. And this is why I like start, maybe was like a little bit of a freedom in that, right? Of saying, okay, I know in my head, I think sitting in front of my computer is productive because that's what I've been doing all day, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting out there, like, maybe take one of the things I always say to clients is volunteer even like 5 hours a week, get in front of some new people.
Mm-hmm.
Start to build your networks, get involved in some professional associations, or, find some ways to get involved in your community, or volunteer. You have space now in your day. So find some ways to connect, to give back, to test drive some ideas.
Mm-hmm.
If you're meeting with someone, say, hey, you know what, I have some time available. I would love to, is there a small project I could just take on?
Yeah.
So finding small ways to get in to organizations, and to be, there's that whole concept of the luck surface, right? And it's like, the more you put yourself out there, the more that you have conversations with people, the more
Mm-hmm.
that you are in person with people, probably your chances are going to go up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say prepare yourself for weekends being kind of hard, right? Without intention. Right. Because you feel some semblance of control, some Monday through Friday, while companies are operating and recruiters might be looking at your applications, and you can message people and maybe they're replying from a networking or informational interviewing perspective. But I would, in my own experience, right, this is probably one of the more critical times to be thoughtful and intentional about what your Saturday and Sunday consist of. Like, make some plans, do some stuff, like get together with friends, schedule play dates for your kids, get out of your house. Because that was always the hard, like, weekends were always really hard for me when I was between jobs. It was just like there's like, it felt like everything was coming to a screeching halt for 2 days. Like everything that I was focused on, which was, find my next.
Right. No, I think this is such good advice, Kent. Get out of your house, be connecting with people, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional connection either. And it's I think your biggest job is, how do I want to show up? Because if you're in that spot of, oh my gosh, I feel stuck, I feel I'm in despair, and you're just staying in your house in front of your computer, that's really tough. It's really tough to find a job that way. And so it's giving yourself permission to be out, to be connecting with people, to be having some structure, maybe a walk every day at a certain time. You meet friends, for coffee once a week, or working outside of the house. Having some practices and structure to your day, because I think that's a big one for people of, what are you going to do every day in the morning? So that's figured out. I'm going to, take the dog for a walk. I'm going to write down everything I'm grateful for. I am going to be in meditation or prayer or whatever. But, spending some time that you can ground yourself with some structure and some rituals in your day and in your week.
Okay, here's what I'm going to do, because we have a little more time to keep talking.
Yeah, great.
I feel, and yet I'm watching the timer for my usual episode length, and I'm like, ooh, okay, what do we do here? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do, this is going to become a 2-episode recording, my first ever. So, but let's wrap up episode number 1 with, because I think right now we've talked about, you've been laid off, take some time. We talked a little bit about resumes. We've talked a little bit about networking and kind of taking care of yourself. I think there's a bit more for us to probably talk a little bit about. But when it comes to this kind of I would say this first half, so to speak, of what we're talking about, what's, and we'll try to keep it really tight. What's one piece of advice you have for job seekers, and what's one piece of advice you have for people who are wondering how I can help?
Yeah. Well, so I would say for job seekers, don't let this scare you, because you can, don't let the external circumstances get in the way of your meaning, your purpose, what you're here to do, and trust the process. Because even in times where there's a lot of people laid off, and I've been doing this a really long time, I know that people usually end up in a better place than and it can be scary, and it is going to require you stepping out of your comfort zone. But you just trust that if you're listening and you're doing that inner work and the outer work, that you will land in a good spot, that it is going to happen. So I think that's a big piece, because it feels scary. And so just trust the process and trust that you will land. And I think for people that are in jobs, I think that this is scary for them too, because they're absorbing the fact that a lot of people have left the organization, the culture is changing. And so there's, I think it just collectively right now, for all of us, we need to be in a place of compassion and empathy. And how can I help my neighbor? And how can I support anyone? Because we're all kind of in it, whether you're in transition or you've been left behind, because that's a whole different thing too. That's scary too. And waiting maybe for the other shoe to drop. Yeah.
All right. Let me wrap us there for part 1. So thank you all. And, what I would say is next week, the week after you're listening to this, we're going to drop part 2.